Hello and a warm welcome to everyone. We are truly delighted to have you join us today from across the globe. As many as 19 countries and 49 cities, and more than 230 participants who have registered. It's both inspiring and heartening to see such a diverse group come together for this session, which speaks in terms of we were discussing the high credibility of the ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter, Marcus having established himself as one of the best speakers on the subject, and the growing interest of the people in this field of transformational coaching. So thank you for making the time to be here, especially across various time zones. We deeply appreciate your presence. So we are excited to kick off the ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter's ICW 2025 celebrations with this insightful webinar led by Marcus, titled Unlocking Team Potential, the Power of the Ontological Approach in Team Coaching. This year's International Coaching Week actually holds special significance for us as we proudly celebrate two major milestones, the 10th anniversary of the ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter and the 30th anniversary of ICF Global. We look forward to an engaging and enriching sessions with all of you. As I mentioned earlier, as you join, kindly make your presence known by introducing yourself in the chat. Please share your name and location. So for today's session, we will receive 1.5 CCUs for core competencies, which has been approved by ICF Global. We will post a claim form towards the end of the session to claim your CCUs, and it will also be emailed to you at your email IDs after the webinar. Please ensure to fill it up. It will be required for if you have to receive your CCU certificates. You will have 2 days to fill up the claim form. That is up to 15th May 2025. And you will get, for all those who are eligible, will receive their CCUs by 29th May. Hope it is clear. Fine. So welcome to this learning session brought to you by Learning and Events Vertical of ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter. Allow me to introduce to you to the hosting team for this session. My name is Sandeep Kalra, and I have the privilege to host this webinar for you today. With me, the hosting team, I have Nandini Agaskar and Anju Saini. I lead the Learning and Events Vertical for ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter. We have Anju Saini, who is one of our most experienced director in the chapter and heads the Social Partnership Vertical, and very kindly agreed to be the co-host. Thank you, Anju. She will support us with the question answer segment and will keep curating as those are appearing in the chat box. We also have Nandini helping us with admin and tech. Nandini works very closely with the ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter Management Committee. Kindly keep yourself off camera. These are the hygiene pointers, and be on mute. This is to avoid disruption in the transmission that could be caused due to bandwidth issue. We are expecting a large audience today. During the session, if you have a burning question, please put it in the chat box, and Anju will share with our speaker or curate them for the Q&A segment, which is during and the end of the session. We'll ask Marcus as how would he like to proceed. We will also launch a quick feedback poll after the QA session. For those who wish to claim CCUs, as we mentioned, we'll post a link in the chat box and also send it on the email. So you please ensure that you put the right name which you would like to be mentioned in your certificate. We also invite you to stay on after the session for time permitting, that we don't exceed the session time. So let's get on to the topic state. As I mentioned earlier, today's topic is unlocking team potential, the power of the ontological approach in team coaching, a cutting-edge approach that supports team transform how they work and perform. And today's expert speaker, one of perhaps the best or the best, is Marcus Marsden, who has graciously agreed to share his knowledge and wisdom on the subject. Marcus is a seasoned executive coach, leadership trainer, and author with over 30 years of international business experience. A graduate of Oxford University, he began his career at Unilever in London, and then we moved to Asia and now resides in Singapore. Marcus specializes in experiential leadership development and coaching senior executives and teams on leadership, interpersonal skills, and change. He has a large list of the best brands, which will spill over pages in case I start naming. Some of those are Unilever, Shell, Petronas, Prudential, etc. He has co-authored 2 books, Fit to Lead in 2017, which is exploring the role of the body in leadership, and Start with Who, 2022, which delves into identity's role in leadership development. Outside work, he's even more interesting. He's passionate about giraffes. We need to know why. Fitness, nutrition, and music. And he may not like you in case if you're not a fan of Bob Dylan and Liverpool. So, welcome, Marcus. How are you feeling as we are launching this ICW by ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter and starting with your webinar today?
Okay, well, thank you. I think the first thing to say is a big thank you for inviting me. I mean, it's a big event for you, 10th anniversary and the 30th anniversary of the ICF in general. And yeah, it's a great opportunity to, begin to talk about coaching, but also there's a lot in the invitation, that you put out. There's ontological coaching, there's team coaching. There's the OAR model you mentioned, there's the BEL model you mentioned, and then I just tossed in trust as well, because that's always something that people want to talk about. So we'll certainly do all that, and I'll make it as interactive as I can. I want to make it engaging. You're not going to see any PowerPoint slides. I'll kick it off by talking initially about the kind of the ontological side, the coaching side. And then I'll pause, get any questions, please do put them in the chat. We're going to curate them, and then one of the team in Mumbai will curate them and just push them back to me, and I'll answer them live here with you. And if there's anything we don't get to, I'm very happy to take them offline as well after the call. So that's not a problem. So please do, anything that comes up, please do put it into the chat, because even if we don't get it tonight, we'll get to it afterwards. And then in the second half, after we've handled the first kind of interactive piece, then I'm going to talk about trust, and I'm going to talk about one of my points of view, which is a little different to how a lot of people see it, which is everyone wants to talk about trust. If you open up any book on team coaching or indeed leadership, trust is always going to have a big chapter. And yes, trust is important, but I'm going to offer you something in the second half of the conversation tonight that I think is often overlooked, which is a big precursor to trust, that you've really got to be great at working with this thing if you're going to have high levels of trust. And so we're going to get to that, as I say, in the second part of the discussion tonight. So that's really what we're going to take a look at. So let's start. Go on.
Yeah.
Anything you add?
Yeah, I'm saying that gives a lot of clarity and
okay,
with the structure. And as you mentioned, we may set the ball rolling by if you can briefly explain what the ontological approach is and how it differs from more traditional method of team coaching.
Yeah, so I'll definitely do that. I'm going to do it step by step. okay? Because there's a lot of things within this, and I'm conscious with such a large audience, we're going to have a variety of come-froms. You know, some people you're going to be very experienced, some people not so experienced, some people do a lot of team coaching, some people know what ontological coaching is, some people have no idea what it is. So we're going to take it step by step and just build it up to make sure that we kind of bring everyone with us. One thing I would also say is, as I'm talking, I think with all the kind of work that I do, and it's inherent in this ontological approach, is the real value comes from you making it real in your life. I promise you, there'll be no intellectual challenge for you guys tonight. In fact, I'm going to do everything I can to make it as simple as possible, because nowadays, complicated is really easy. There's a lot of money in complicated. You know, think of all the content providers out there. There's lots of money in that. But actually, the real skill, the real challenge, I think, especially nowadays, is to cut through that and keep things simple. And if you keep it simple, then you begin to see things. If I use this analogy of the mirror, it's like you begin to see things about you and coaching. Understanding coaching is like the consolation prize. Honestly, you can put that into ChatGPT. You don't need to be here tonight for that. You see, the question is, how do you relate to it, you individually? Yeah, there'll be some similarities with everyone on the call, but there will also be differences. And that's where the real, what I say, the real juice lies in looking at not just what's the intellectual definition of these things we're going to talk about, but how do you see them? How do they hit you? How do they impact you? How does that show up in your life, in your career, in your coaching, or when you're being coached? Not everyone on here may be a coach. You may be here as a business leader who's experienced coaching. I don't know. So wherever you're from in that kind of multiverse, that's my challenge for you, and that would be my offer for you in terms of getting the most out of our time together tonight. It's not just to intellectually engage and think, okay, I understand that. Yeah, that's great. But what's the impact on you? How does that impact you? That would be my kind of starter for 10 to get the most out of this. Now, one of the things that, again, the way I tend to work is I'm going to use this flip chart. I like working like that. Anything that I write on here, we will no doubt give you some handouts. I'm not sure exactly how that will happen, but don't worry about it. You can pin me. I think, Joylyn, is that right? They can pin me, or whatever you need to do. But we will make those available afterwards. So if everything's not desperately clear on here, don't panic about that. You can take screenshots, do what you want. But I want to make it iterative. I don't just want to give you PowerPoint slides, which again is part of what I'm going to call this approach, because it's human being to human being. So that said, let's start. I thought what might be interesting is start with human beings pre-coaching, rather than go straight into coaching. You see, one of the things that happens for us as human beings is as we grow up, you see, what happens is, here's me as a youngster or you as a youngster, and then there's the people that you interact with over here. And then there's the whatever we say and do. So here's me, here's the interaction, and then here's you or them, right? Now, before coaching comes on the scene, and this is what we learn, and we learn it in every culture, it doesn't matter where you're coming in from, all of us do this as human beings. We go through some stages. Now, they're not sequential, and I'm not saying everyone spends equal time in equal one, but we all go through this kind of piece in terms of how do we interact with the world around us. One of the first things we learn to do is we have our own ideas, our own beliefs, and if someone disagrees, then we make it about them. And we say, well, they're stupid, they're wrong, they're not good enough, they're not smart. And that starts on the playground. Okay, so I know you're all sitting there as coaches going, oh, no, I would never do that. No, yes, you do. Okay, that's part of being human. Okay, and you learned that a long time ago. I do it, you do it. We've developed other muscles now, but because this is one of the earliest muscles we develop, that does still happen. Okay, so this is before we get to any kind of coaching. And then we go to business school or we go to university, and we mature a little bit and we say, okay, so it's not about the human being. It's not that they're stupid. It's not that they're wrong. It's just that their ideas are wrong. Their actions, their thoughts, what they're doing is wrong. They don't understand. And so now, instead of making it personal, we make it about what they're saying or doing. And we say, well, my idea is better than yours. My strategy is better than yours. And we learn that, and you get promoted for that at work, let's be honest. So that's another thing that we tend to do. So there's 1, 2. And as I say, they're not sequential, but they show up for us as human beings. So this is kind of context of being human. And then, of course, the third thing we do is we blame ourselves. Oh, I'm not good enough. I should have known that. Oh, I'm stupid. Oh, how could I make that mistake? Oh, I'm never going to be good at this. I'm not the kind of person who ... And so then we just start blaming ourselves. And we're very good at all three. And as a human being, again, this is where you can make it real for you. You think, okay, where do I tend to spend most of my time? Because these are very kind of ingrained human habits. Am I very good at externalizing, looking at other people, how they should change? Is it about what they're saying or doing? Or do I spend a lot of time beating myself up? That's kind of part of the human condition. So and let's be honest about that. We all do those to a greater or lesser extent. But then, of course, other things came into play. So let's now begin to move forward into coaching. So we're not going to get to ontological coaching yet, but let's bring in coaching. And where does coaching kind of begin to intervene in that? Well, let's say I want to create a result. I want to create a result in my life. And then in order to create the result, some kind of action or actions are required. Now, what a lot of people do is they toggle between the two. If I get the result that I want, no problem. I just keep doing the action, or it's there forever, depending on what the result is. If I don't get the result that I want, then I come back here and I change the action. And if that's not working, I need to get some input. I need a teacher to tell me what to do, or I need a manager to tell me what to do. I need some skill development. And this is what typically gets called technical challenges. And technical challenges are very valid. There's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly reasonable in the technical, what I would call the technical area. And this is where things like management, teaching, consulting, anything like that really plays a big part, because then I need to know what to do. Once I know what to do, then I can do it and I can create the result. And that, as I say, in some areas can be very effective. There's nothing wrong with that. And for a long time in business, I mean, it's easy to forget now, but if you go back, before the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, last century, that was really what people did. I mean, you throw in consulting here or training, but really that's what it was, until a guy called Timothy Galway came along in the 80s, people like John Whitmore, and they started saying, well, hang on, there's something else going on here. It can't just be that. Because if knowing what to do, why, when, on its own, doesn't cut it. So that's when coaching began to make its appearance. And a lot of you on here, if not all of you, will know things like the GROW model, which is great. Again, nothing wrong with the GROW model. Okay, kind of performance coaching in a game of tennis in the 80s, all that kind of work. But again, here with this kind of coaching, you're largely focusing here, which is, what's the goal? What result do you want? What's the reality? What actions have you taken so far? What's your current result? And then what options do you see? So again, in here, what options are there in actions that you can take? And then you do your wrap up. Okay, so although coaching began to come in here in the 80s, it was still largely in this area. And this is what the HR practitioners, you will know as single loop learning. Okay, nothing wrong with that. That can be very useful given the right kind of challenge. However, where ontological coaching begins to come in is it says, this is great, and this is part of the equation, but you're missing another big chunk on the other side. And the other side is what in the literature, this is the first model that was introduced in the invitation, is what we call the observer. Now, the observer in this case is really just the person who's seeing and doing and taking action in the world, the human being, if you like. And now that immediately sets up a second loop. This is why the HR practitioners will know it as, which is double loop learning. And here, if this is technical, what we call here is adaptive. Because here, it opens up a very different domain of possibility, which is for the person who's involved. And by the way, when I'm saying person, it could be team, which I will touch on later, but it's exactly the same principle, which is how do I, as the observer or the team, if you like, how do I need to adapt? Where do I need to grow in order to see more possibility? Because who I am is like an invisible boundary on what I see as possible. And you'll know this. You walk into a room, someone else walks into a room, someone else walks into a room, and you see some overlap in terms of what's possible, but some people see things differently to you, and they see different possibilities. They see different possibilities for action, for strategy, for possibility, ideas, all sorts of things. So the ontological approach really sits in over here. And this word ontological, if you've not Googled it yet, is really about the study of being. That's all it means, ontos. It's like the study of being. And of course, in this case, it's the human being. So a human being has an ontology, okay? And that's where this word comes from. And so the thing that really distinguishes these two pieces is in the ontological approach. And as I say, I talk about the individual, but it's just as true for the team, because a team is made up of individuals and human beings. We start to take a bigger, deeper dive into here. And the reason that we do that is if we do that, it begins to expand that human being or that team in terms of what they see as possible. That's why one of the books was mentioned up front, Start With Who, is a kind of classic way, ontological way of framing what we're up to here. Because so many development efforts, it doesn't matter whether it's training, doesn't matter if it's coaching or anything else, any change that someone or a team is trying to make, there's some invisible boundaries. And some of these invisible boundaries are, who do I believe I can become? Who am I being right now? You see, those kind of things are like a shroud that sit on top of all the great strategy and ideas and knowledge that people throw around. That's all great, but if I don't really believe that I can expand into that area, I'm not going to do it. And I'm going to find some very good excuses to justify why not. And so the ontological approach begins to explore in here. So one of the consequences of that is there's more possibility. More possibility leads to more possibility of result. And because it's driven from here, it can lead to much more systemic or sustainable change. That's the other piece that in here, often, the classic here is action and result. A classic is just health. Okay, so, you go on a diet, maybe you learn what you should eat, you learn what you should do or not do in terms of going to the gym or playing cricket or playing sport, and you do it and you create the result, and maybe you lose some weight. And then 6 months later, you've put on the weight. Maybe you even put on more weight than where you started. Very easy to do that because it's not sustainable, because you're forcing action into, even if it's good action, even if it's correct, intellectually pure, correct action, it doesn't stay. And it doesn't stay because of the way the team or the individual is constituted. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But that's the principle, if you like. Now, the other thing that's great, that I think is great, I should say, in the ontological approach, is it absolutely puts the coach into the game. And so any kind of ontological training for coaches, the first half of that program always takes a look at the coach. So again, you see the difference here is we're going to look at the coach as well, because the coach is a factor in this new system. And so it's not just about the coach sitting on the sidelines, giving feedback, asking questions, having a cup of coffee, and that it's not. The coach, everything that makes up the coach is also going to be very powerful to look at. So what are my beliefs? How am I constituted, for example? And I'll talk more about that in a moment. So at a very deep level, although we talk about ontological coaching, one of the things I want to offer you that's certainly been true for me in my life is it is coaching, but really any kind of well-grounded ontological coaching piece is really about much more than coaching. It's really about how human beings integrate and interact with their world. How do they create it? How do they interpret it? And what meaning do they make in it? And as a result, what relationships do they create and what conversations are they willing to have? And that, I always talk about it as it's really coaching plus plus. It's because the coach is put into the center of it in terms of the way it shows up for the coach before we then kind of teach the coach some of the classic coaching models. Okay, so the ontological approach is much more about being, especially in the initial part, before we get into just the doing of what a coach can or should do. Okay, so it's a much deeper dive into what it means to really be human in relationship with other human beings, because ultimately that's what coaching is. Coaching is a relationship, whether it's a one-to-one relationship or it's the coach with a team, you're still in relationship with other human beings. So that's the kind of pre-coaching, where coaching came from, ontological coaching, what makes it different. Now, within the ontological coaching, I want to introduce the second model. Okay, if this is the OAR model that was mentioned on the invitation, inside the observer, there's also another way that we can split this down. And again, this is very different in the ontological approach than almost any other approach. I think I can fairly say any other approach, really, in terms of how it begins to look at human beings. Because what it does is it says, look, for any human being has three things. All of us have three things. Now, you can argue there's more than three things, but there's at least three things. Every human being has a body.
Sure.
Every human being has emotions or moods. We all live in emotions and moods. We have a system called the limbic system, and that's one of the things that makes us a mammal, is we have that. We're not just purely intellectual. And of course, we have language, by which I mean internal and external. Now, all of these are important, and they all go to make up the overall observer. If you remember from OAR, they all go together. Now, these are critical because when I get them in sync, in the middle here, this is what some places will call congruence. I'm very congruent. I like to call it authentic. It comes to the same thing. You see, it's very powerful when you begin to look at all of these. And again, everything I'm saying is individual, but it's also true for teams, which is, let's start here, for example, emotions and moods. Learning how to identify and work with this intangible thing called moods and emotions is critical. It's critical one-to-one. It's even more critical when you're working with a team. I would say 80% of the time I start with a team in a business, their mood is resignation. Honestly, we don't think the targets are too big. We don't believe we can get it. There's a physical part to that, as you can see. We're not sure. Yeah, we're going to work hard, etc. But underneath that, we really don't think we didn't get it last year, or we got it last year, but now they've doubled the target. And so many teams live in that. So how are you going to shift that? How are you going to work with that? A lot of teams live in resentment. They don't understand. Head office doesn't understand me. They just tell me what to do, and my boss and this team and the other team, and marketing and sales arguing, and the factory. And it's very easy just to get into resentment. Anxiety. One of the biggest moods now out there, am I going to lose my job? What happens if I don't get the target? What happens if there's all these smart people coming up. I don't think I can work with these Gen Z, whatever it is now, lots of anxiety around. So those kind of moods, knowing how to identify them and then work with them, shift them, is a huge part of any team coaching for sure, but also individual one-to-one coaching, and a big part of ontological work. Okay. The body, which for a lot of people is either completely invisible until they have a heart attack, or it's just a pain in the neck. Honestly, people just often don't want to talk about it. It's like I'm a brain on a stick. My body is purely there to have my brain get to the next meeting. Well, actually, in the ontological approach, the body plays a huge part. When I first started working in this area as a participant myself, this was some of my biggest areas. Now, I'm not talking about body language. Body language is a part of it, but there's so much more than that. Learning to work with what's going on for people internally is huge. Right now, things like breathing patterns just become totally invisible for people. In a team, what happens in a team, physically? What happens to people's breathing when they're in the same team? What happens to them physically? How do they hold themselves? How do they move themselves? Have huge impacts. And that's one of the things that we focus on a lot. And for a lot of people, that's completely invisible. And then, of course, we have language. The language I say to myself in here, my beliefs, my attitudes, my mindsets, my assessments. And then the language that I use out here, my declarations, my requests, my promises. Now, the thing with language is everyone knows that it's important, but it becomes like a blur. Everyone's communicating all the time. It's that famous quote, it's impossible not to communicate. So we're all communicating. But it's like anything that we do a lot as human beings, we develop habits. You just do. It's the only way you get out of the door in the morning. If you didn't have habits, if you didn't have patterns, you'd never get out the door in the morning. So as human beings, if we do things a lot, we develop habits. Okay. And language is a classic one, internal and external. And once you have a habit, the habit begins to have power over you because that's just the way it is. That's just who I am, but it's not. That's just the way the world is, but it's not. That's just the way you see it. Well, she's just like that. Well, no, she's not. That's just the way you see her, for example. You see, so we have lots of habits in there. In language, we have lots of habits in body and emotion. And a lot of what the coach is doing, the ontological approach, is learning to identify that in themselves, as I said earlier, and then become adept at holding the mirror up and supporting people to see what's become invisible to them. And so making the invisible visible. You see, you can't change a habit until you know you've got the habit. And by definition, habits just disappear from view. Mental, physical, emotional. Okay, so this, in summary, I'm not going to go any deeper on the ontological approach. I'm conscious I haven't got to team coaching yet. I will come to that. But in terms of pre-coaching, where we all started as kids, and then what happened, in the early part of the 20th century, then coaching coming in towards the end of it, and then how ontological coaching has developed that. That's the kind of, if you want to know how ontological coaching is distinct from coaching overall, that's some of the key pieces. A focus on sustainable change, being human, looking at BEL, and very much having the coach be part of that in terms of getting aware of themselves, not just intellectually, cognitively understanding coaching, which, as I said earlier, is really the consolation prize. So I'm going to pause there because that's a lot of download, okay? And let's see if we get any questions. I can't see the chat from here, so we'll see.
So Marcus,
okay, so let's get some questions. and then I'll come back. But I'm going to come to team coaching. I'm going to come to trust. Okay, so don't worry if we haven't heard about that yet. Don't worry, that's coming. But I wanted to get this up front before we go any further. Okay.
So thank you, Marcus. It has been a very insightful share so far. And I'd like to pick up the question that Vrinda has just expressed, which is, what is the difference between ontological coaching versus somatic coaching, given the focus on the body? So that's from Vrinda.
Okay, great question. Somatic coaching, really, it can exist separately, but in the frame of ontological coaching, somatic, which is just comes from the Greek soma, body, is a subsection of ontological coaching. But that said, there are people out there who might say they're pure somatic coaches, but the ontological approach would include somatic coaching. Just fire away. Anything else?
Yeah, Anju, we can move on to the next.
We don't have. Okay, yes. Chitra said just what Marcus is referring to. What is it that I am feeling, thinking, behaving as a coach? And what is it that's happening with the other, which is the client, as well as the dynamics between us?
Exactly. And that's absolutely spot on. I mean, that is exactly the piece, which is there's me, there's you, and there's us. And that's why if you employ me as a coach, when I walk into the room, certain things will happen. If you employ someone else as a coach, there may be some similarities, but there'll be some differences, even if we've been to the same training school, we've learned the same theories and intellectually, because I'm a different human being. And that will show up in relationship. It's not a process, it's not a science. It very much all shows up in relationship and conversation. So that person mentioned is, yeah, absolutely spot on. That's key.
Moving on, I would like to share a few compliments that people have been pouring in, coming in from Vijay Lakshmi, saying that this was so clear and simple. Thanks, Marcus. Pramod acknowledging by expressing that he loves the clarity that's been expressed here and that's been shared. Thanks, Marcus, for that. And Mohan has a question saying that what can be an example of a language discerned while coaching?
A language what? What was the other word? A language?
Discerned.
Discerned.
Okay. I just
An example.
Mohan, would you like to unmute and
Yeah,
ask?
tell me what that means.
just an example of a language based, if we were to discern.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think let me answer it and see if this is where you're going with it. And if it's not, just tell me. Okay. So one of the things within language, as an example, we all have patterns, we all have habits, and they are going to be linked. None of these are obviously individual. They are linked.
You get my point. Yes. Change your ID first. I don't want you to get into MC.
Okay.
You're the VPN address,
Just mute, please. Can you just
Yes, Daddy.
So, okay. So as an example of language, what I'm going to use the word is a distinction. So a classic distinction that I see when I'm coaching people, let's say going towards C-suite or going towards senior management positions, very often, one of the things that shows up in their language, but is linked to lots of things, is they don't like making requests. You see, and they don't like making requests because they've been promoted for getting the job done themselves. And so in terms of their language, they understand what a request is intellectually, they know what it is, they just don't like doing it. And they don't like doing it because they don't like asking for help. They don't like opening up for all sorts of reasons. And it makes sense because they got lots of badges, they got lots of stripes coming up the ranks by being the doer. And then you get to a certain level in management where you've got to be less the doer and more the working with and through other people. And so one of the things that, if you think of it like a weak muscle, one of their weaker muscles is asking for support, making a request for someone to come in and support them, because support didn't get them promoted. Asking for support didn't work earlier on. So that's just, and I could talk for a long time on that, but as an example, one of the distinctions, I think what you call a discerning piece within language would be about that, which is how comfortable am I to actually really make well-grounded requests, even though intellectually they understand they should be doing it.
Thanks, Marcus. Thanks a lot.
Marcus, with your permission, there are 3-4 more very interesting questions that's only taking our conversation forward. And the next interesting one comes from Dexter. He's asking that is ontological coaching a kind of a merger of EQ, NLP, and somatic coaching?
Yes, it's a combination. You know, nowadays I think everything's really an amalgam to a certain, so one of, you know, to a greater or lesser extent. So when I started in getting on this path, 98, 99, 2000, NLP was really the in thing, and I started with that, and I did a master practitioner in that, and so I've got that. You know, there's a language model in there which is great, which some of you will no doubt know. And then somatic coaching is much more recent in terms of links to neuroscience. Somatic coaching's really accelerated in the last, I would say, 5 years or so. It's been around longer, but it's really accelerated as we've learned more and more about the neuroscience and linking that to the whole body, not just what's in my head as a brain. That's become huge as well. So there's, yes, it's an amalgam, if you like. And no one ontological coach will coach exactly the same way. And that, certainly if they come through my school, because I'm a big believer in that, which is we work, we bring things together, we synergize there's no one answer, okay? And so, yes, there's some fundamentals, just like playing tennis. There's some fundamentals, forehand, backhand, watch the ball, move through, etc. Federer, Nadal, they both did that. But they were very different. If you think about it, they played the same game, they had the same fundamentals, and yet you saw them on court, and one was the bull and one was the ballet dancer, but they were both pretty good. And that's my approach to coaching overall, and certainly the ontological piece. Okay?
Yet again, in an expression by Pramod, he says that unlike individual coaching, where we clarify the goal first, but we do not work to clarify the goals in the beginning of ontological coaching. So what is your view on this?
The way we work with goals, individual versus team, there is a distinction. I mean, one of the things, if we begin to look at team, there's just a lot more moving parts. I mean, obviously, maybe you've got 8, 10 people in front of you instead of one for a start. So the way that you work with the team on what are their goals is going to be a little different to what you would do in a one-to-one, for sure. You know, and there's a big piece there in terms of working with alignment. And one of the big distinctions and difficulties people get into with team coaching is they try and get agreement. And agreement and alignment are not the same thing. And so what are the goals? How do we articulate them is key. But I will go back to my team coaching model. For me, always starts with those who questions. Who are we as a team? Who are we being right now as a team? Who do we believe we can become as a team? You know, those questions are paramount for me, just as they are if I'm working in a one-to-one. If I get that right, then everything kind of flows from that in terms of goals, objectives, all of that.
Yes. Another question from, or maybe an expression from Vijay Lakshmi is that, will this ability to bring in the coach's wholeness into the client's experience of coaching be a place where AI-based coaching will fall behind?
Well, that depends what you think about AI-based coaching. I mean, I would hold my hand up and say I'm not an expert in that area. What I would say is my point of view, and that's all it is in terms of this area, is I think AI is clearly going to have an impact on this industry, just like every other industry. And I do think that especially in the ontological space, the human element is actually always going to be very powerful. Certainly, I know, AI will develop as it develops, but for now, in the foreseeable, as human beings, we do crave human contact. Being acknowledged by another human being feels a little different to being acknowledged by ChatGPT. So there's a big area in there in terms of how that will interplay. But I do think ontological coaching is more set up to work alongside AI because of that human element that is not irreplaceable. I wouldn't go that far, but it is different. I'll give you a little funny question, by the way. So in terms of working with AI right now, one of the things I love to do, and I do this with teams or individuals, we do the classic kind of coaching, and they'll make some commitments and they'll say they're going to do something before I see them again. And then pretty much always nowadays, when I meet them next time, the first thing I ask them is, how come you haven't done what ChatGPT told you to do? And that's one of my favorites. It's a bit of an icebreaker just to have them a bit of fun, because I know they've all ChatGPT'd everything, and yet they haven't achieved their results. We go, well, how come? How come you didn't do that? And that often opens up some quite entertaining examples. But that's just a kind of simple answer.
Thank you, Marcus. This has been a wonderful experience of asking you amazing questions and getting so much of clarity from you. And on this note, I would like to ask what Deepak says just now, saying, so is the limit of the coach's being, is the limit of the coaching experience that can be created by the coach for the client?
Well, I think it goes back to one of the earlier questions. There's the coach, there's the client, and then there's the coach and the client. And so that interaction, just like the whole of life, not just coaching, that's where life happens. Life happens in relationship. Life happens in conversation. The conversations I'm willing to have and not willing to have. The relationships, how big are my relationships? That doesn't mean I have to like everybody. It's not about being liked, but how big, how powerful, how productive are my conversations that I'm having? And that's always going to be at stake when there's two or more people together. Does that limit the coaching? Yes, in a way it does. And I think in the ontological approach, we don't so much talk about change as we talk about growth and expansion. So when I'm working with someone, a team or an individual, it's not that I want them to change, because change kind of implies that what they're doing right now, there's something not quite right about it. So I've got to change it. Whereas growth and expansion is very different. And that's one of my frames that I take into any interaction as a coach, team coach or personal coach or leadership development, is growth and expansion rather than changing. That's why my point of view, again, something a little different to a lot of people, I'm not a fan of unlearning. I don't believe you need to unlearn anything. What you have is what you have. The breakdown is not that you need to unlearn something. The breakdown is you begin to see it, that it's not necessarily the only way. You see, the things that get in people's way, it's not generally the things, it's that they think that's it. This is a fact, but it's not a fact. And so it's not that they need to unlearn. It's that they need to see that what they've got in front of them isn't a fact. It's not the way the world is. It's not who they are. It's who they've come to believe they are. It's how they've come to see the world. And so they can grow that. They can expand that. And that's different. So that's a real hobby horse of mine that I think is part and parcel of the ontological approach. Growth and expansion rather than changing something. Anything else?
And I just want
and
to bring
Deepak Sawhney just adds to this that it perhaps also links to 7 coaching conversations. And he wants to know what's the coach experience in all of this.
Well, that's always the classic question, right? So as a coach, what am I experiencing? And that's why in our, we offer here is also coach supervision, which is as a coach, I certainly for me, I'm fully invested. When I go in, it's a physical, mental, and emotional experience. I don't just kind of put my brain into the coaching and then take my body and my heart away for a rest. I'm fully in it, physically, mentally, and emotionally. I'm in there, and as a result of that, yeah, a lot of stuff comes up for me as a coach, and that's true. I think if you speak to any seasoned ontological practitioner, we live it. It's not just like, it's a kind of way of living. It's not just a way of coaching. It's how I show up with my friends, my community around me, my family as well. So as a result of that, it is very much a full body, full on human experience. And as a result, it can be very useful to, work with some kind, whatever you call them. Another, you can have a coach. I have a coach, whether it's a mentor, supervisor, but having someone who can work with you like that, I think especially true in the ontological field, it can be very powerful.
And one last question.
Anju, just I wanted to bring in that sense of realization. We are 52 minutes into the webinar, and there's a second piece also which we have to cover. And while every question and answer will bring in a lot of clarity, I think one last question, and then we shift on to the next piece. And in case if there is some time left towards the end, we can take these questions. So, Anju,
sure. So I'll just take one last question now, because it's very important. So I think. Okay. So this is from you, Sandeep. How does the proficiency in ontological approach depend upon the level of self-awareness of coach, since it is in the being? And I think Vrinda has added to it, saying sounds like the coach might also need to do some grounding, centering to be more present before they get into a session. So
Absolutely.
Your views on this?
No, totally. I mean, really, the answer's in the question with both of those. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And that, honestly, for me, that's the kind of coaching I want to be a part of. Do I want to just go in with my ChatGPT? Okay, I've got my coaching questions. I understand feedback, and just kind of sit there behind the desk and kind of robotically coach. So I'm not saying that's bad, but it's just not the kind of coaching I want to do. I want to be in there as a human being. Now, that doesn't mean I lose my coaching hat. I'm still in there as the coach, but I'm in there as a coach, as a human being, not as some kind of, some kind of robo coach kind of thing. I think I've done that. Honestly, earlier in my career, I think I certainly have fallen into that trap, if I'm honest. But I think now, where I am, I really want to be in there as a human being relating to other human beings. Why? Because that's where life happens. So I'm not yes, I've got a role as a coach, but really coaching for me is much more nowadays about a way of being. It's a way of relating to the world and relating to other people, not just something I do between, 8 and 6 every day. Okay?
So before we begin the second piece, because I would not like to interrupt your flow, but two questions which I have in mind are emanating from your post and the introductory video which you had posted, which had evoked a lot of interest, and people wanted to know what is underneath the trust which we have to talk about. If you can unpack it a bit. The second, your recent post in LinkedIn about the session in which you said integrity is to team as authenticity is to an individual. If you can elaborate on that also.
Okay. I'll come to the second one second, see if we have time for it. So I can do it a simple version of that right at the end. But let me get to the trust piece first, because I know that was the kind of teaser I put out there. The other piece around purpose, engagement, and especially integrity, I think is really powerful as a framework. And anyone here, you can look at it on LinkedIn, etc. But anyway, we can get back to that. So let's talk about team coaching then. I'll keep my eye on the time. Very simple way in, my favorite simple way in. First of all, everything that I've said holds true for team coaching. It's just there's more moving parts. Okay, so it's more dynamic. There's more going on. as a coach, I am more at stake. When I walk into a room in front of 10 people, I am more at stake than if I just walk in front of one person. And that's part of me. Maybe I get a bit nervous. Maybe my breath goes up and down, and maybe I need to center ground, as someone said before, you know, and that's part of it. So everything I said still applies. But let me give you my favorite way into team coaching, because it shows how you can begin to work with a team from an ontological perspective. Now, I've got a very simple model, and it's very much the model that is the underpinning of the Start With Who book and approach, if you like. Now, if you've done any change management, you'll be very familiar with as is and to be states. Okay, so as is where we are now, to be is where you want to get to. Very simple. And then down here, we can talk about either internal, external, or another way. When I've worked with this, sometimes people prefer tangible, intangible. Both work. I've had feedback that some people like one, some people like the other. So internal, tangible, external, intangible. Okay. I've written that the wrong way around. Just checking to see if anyone's paying attention. Okay, intangible, tangible. Now, let's work it through. Now, normally I would do this very interactively if I'm doing it with a team, but because of this format and because I am conscious of time, I'll build it up very quickly. So if we start top left, we go, okay, so what's the intangible in terms of where we want to go? What do we want to create that's in the future, but it is intangible? And it's it's internal in that I can see it, but I can see it in my mind's eye. That is what I will offer in this model, is really where vision lies. What's the vision? Where do I want to go? Whether it's a team, whether it's an individual, doesn't matter, but especially true with teams, where are we going in the future? Okay. Now, if I come across here, making it more tangible, if I make a vision more tangible, but it's still in the future, that's where goals and targets sit. So goals and targets make the vision more tangible, but they're still in the future. A lot of companies, a lot of teams love to spend time up here. Why? Because it's very safe. It's much safer to talk about the future than it is to talk about where you are now. And so a lot of teams, and again, remember what I said at the beginning, you want to make this real for you. A lot of teams, a lot of individuals love to talk about where they're headed because it's a lot easier, it's a lot safer to articulate the future. So let's come down here. Now we're in the as is, the now, okay? So here, this is where, what am I doing right now? And in particular, what are the results that I have? Very important. So it is about actions that I'm currently doing, but the actions, of course, end up producing the results. So actions and results that I'm currently doing. Now, this is where all of these so far, the classic kind of coaching that I spoke about earlier, management, teaching, all of that, really focus largely in here. What should we do? Smart goals. Let's talk about visioning. Let's talk about the strategy, the actions. The thing again that really has ontological coaching be a little different is this piece. Okay, now I want you to think about, normally I would do this interactively, but just think about, so many of you on the call, you want to think about what's in here, because what's in here actually drives everything else. But a lot of people don't want to talk about it. A lot of people don't think they need to talk about it. A lot of people don't even know it exists. But actually, this is the key. And this, you often hear it called culture. The word I'm going to use, though, the big word is context. Because culture is really just a form of context. Now, why is this so important? It's critical in the ontological model because culture is what creates the results. The culture is what sets what's permissible, what's available, what's possible, and then that creates the results that you have. So this tends to be your beliefs, your attitudes. So a very simple example we'll note, which we will come back to, is trust. You see, my beliefs about trust. Do I trust supply chain? Do I trust my boss? Do I trust myself? Etc., etc. See, that's all part of my context. You can't see it. You see, you can't see this, but it generates this. Now, if you follow that logic, if this creates that, so this creates that. Your culture, your context create the actions and ultimately your results. Therefore, critically, your actions and results reveal the context that you have. That's the way it works. If this creates that, then in reverse, this must reveal that. Now, let me give you an example. It's not to do with business, but you'll get the idea. To show you how this works, very simply. What a lot of teaching, management, and honestly, consulting, often even some coaches quite often do, is they come in with their great ideas and their thoughts and their plans and all of that. And then they work with a team, and the team comes up with ideas and plans and strategies. So that's great. So now we've got this huge deck of what we should do. And so you put it in here. You create new goals and you put it in here. The problem is, this new stuff, it can be intellectually pure. It can come from the best business schools. It can come from wherever you like. But if it doesn't fit in your operating context, it ain't going to last. It's not going to work. It's like okay, let me give you an example. It's like you do all that work and you say, right, I really like orchids. So I'm going to get all these orchids and I'm going to put it into here. The problem is my context is a desert. Doesn't work. You can water that orchid as much as you want. You can put 100 orchids in the desert and you can water them. As soon as you look away, the orchids die. Why? Because orchids don't grow in the desert. That is what the majority of training programs and consultants and teachers will do. And even managers, they'll say, well, look, this worked for me, so this is what you should do. Okay, Rafa Nadal, I know you're pretty good with a double-handed backhand, but I think you should go single-handed. And then they wonder why it doesn't work. Now, I'm exaggerating to make the point, but you see, that's what I want you to see. The ontological approach is powerful because it begins to identify this, but you've got to have the courage to let this do its work. You see, most people, most teams don't like to do that. They like to do it when it's a result that they like. When I got my KPI, when growth was 50%, sure, let's look at the context now. Let's see how great I am. And then when you don't get the KPI the next year and you don't get the growth, that was because of Donald Trump. No, that was the tariffs. No, that was the exchange rate. Well, have you seen the rupee recently? You see, and that's the breakdown. Everyone loves to look at this, revealing a context when they're winning. People don't like to do it when they're not winning. And that's one of the big breakdowns that as an ontological coach, you've got to be willing to look at. Are there external factors? Yeah, sure there are. But the ontological approach will always hold true that actually what's happening is your results are generated from who you are being as a team or as an individual. Now, that can be very challenging. People often don't want to look at that. They get very resistant to that. They've got their stories. But that's one of the things that comes up as a coach often as an ontological coach, is that grounding, that you can hold your ground and have this operate as a mirror. You see, the power of context is that it's invisible. The context is what creates, sustains, and allows for content. That's why if we our desert example. This is just a simple example. If you wake up in the morning surrounded by sand, it's very hot, there's a camel walk past, there's dunes, maybe a palm tree, you look at the content, you look at the results around you, the content, and then you infer that you're in a desert. It doesn't say desert. There's no sign that says desert, but you look at the content, the camel, the sand, the heat, the palm tree, and you go, oh, I'm in a desert. That was a good night last night. That reveals it. The only way you can see context, and this is where it has its power, is its invisibility, is by looking here. And trust is a classic. If I segue now into trust. Trust is a classic because my trust levels here, operate here, they will generate certain results and actions. If I have high trust levels with someone, I've got more possibility for action than if I have low trust levels. That action will lead into results. Those results, we can then begin to infer something about trust levels between you and me, or between the team members or the stakeholders, okay? So very simply, that's how I bring ontological coaching. I expand the ontological model that I started with into teams. And there's a lot underneath this, there's other models, but that's where I'm going to leave that bit for now. Now, let's finally get to trust, because I know you want to know about trust. Okay. Is trust important? Yes, 100% unequivocally, yes. Any book you read, as I said, you probably read things like Lencioni and all the famous team books, they'll always talk about trust. It's very interesting, and as we'll see. Now, let's isolate some key things within trust. So what do I mean by that? Well, the first thing is, it's a risk. Now, it's very important. You are choosing to take a risk when you trust somebody or something. You are. You see, inherent in the idea of trust is that it can be broken. If it can't be broken, if it's literally impossible that this thing cannot be broken, it's not trust anymore. And yet so many people lose their shit, let's just say, when the trust is broken. But honestly, that was a risk you chose to take. There is a risk. There's no way around that. Okay, so trust is a risk, and that's an important grounding point for any definition of trust. But it's a risk to do with something you value. You see, if I give this pen to you, yeah, at some level, I'm trusting you, but I don't really value this pen because I've got a lot of pens. So I am risking it. I am putting something of value that I value at risk with you, but this pen isn't it. Now, my giraffe, that's different. You see, if I put that in your hands, I love this giraffe. He's been with me a long time. Okay, that's different. If I put that giraffe in your hands, now it's a risk and it's something I value. It's very, very different. So the interesting thing about trust is you begin to see what you value and what you don't, because it's not a one size fits all. I might trust someone in one domain, but not trust them in a different domain. I might trust my wife in the domain of finances, but maybe not in some other domains, like musical taste, as a random example. So there's very different things. It's not a one size fits all. What may be a trust for you isn't a trust for me because different kind of value attached to it. Because if we're in the domain of trust, I'm going to make something vulnerable. So it is a risk. Inherent in trust is that it can be broken. It's something I value. Now, it might be something tangible, might be something intangible, like my reputation. But I certainly do value it. And I am making it vulnerable because I am putting it in the hands of someone else, hands metaphorically of someone else. Now, pretty much anybody is going to be in agreement with that kind of definition. They may have other elements as well. And we can talk about how to build trust and rebuild trust. And there's some kind of techniques within that we can talk about. But I don't think that's the intriguing bit. You see, that's what I've said so far is not the intriguing bit. The reason I said what I said on the invitation is I absolutely share what everyone else has ever talked about with regards to trust in terms of relationships, in regards to teams. Absolutely. But where I think my approach, our approach, is that add something is this. You see, if it's a risk, it's something you value, and you're going to make it vulnerable. You're making it vulnerable to another human being or other human beings. Okay, there's something out here that you're putting at risk. Now, the first thing that begins to show you is what you value, which is in itself very, very interesting and very useful to get in touch with. The second thing, and often people miss this, is really trust always begins with your self-trust. I'll say that again. Any kind of trust is really embedded in your level of self-trust. Now, why would I say that? Because it's going to be based in your willingness to trust is going to be based in your perception of your ability to live without this thing. Because if I'm risking something I value and making it vulnerable to you, do I trust that if you break it, metaphorically, am I still going to be okay? Can I still live? Can I still get through life? That's a lot about my own ability to trust myself, to be resilient, if you like, to be adaptive. If I have very low levels of self-confidence, for example, or my ability to live without something here, then I'm going to be very, very wary about trusting and putting that thing of value in your hands. So that's something that I think is the first thing that I think people often overlook. Because trust, people always think, well, it's to do with other people, and it is. But often, think about your own, and again, make this real for you. Think about your own level of self-trust. How much do you really believe in your ability to, or capacity to exist if that trust is broken? Because that is a huge invisible lens that operates for people. Now, that's not the key piece. That's one thing. That's not really what I was pointing to in my invitation video. Here's what I want to offer you, which is this. If it's a risk and you're working with other human beings, you're taking something of value, you're making it vulnerable, and you are risking it, it will be broken. Now, we can talk, and there is lots, you can Google it and ChatGPT, ways to build trust and rebuild trust and all of that. But ultimately, and some of you maybe, if you're piecing this together, you may see where I'm going with this. It's inevitable that trust will be broken. You will break trust with other people. You've probably done it today. Other people will break trust with you. That's probably happened to you today. Certainly by this stage in your life, you've had your heart broken and you've broken someone else's heart. It's just the way it goes. It's inevitable when you're working with other human beings. You can't get through life if you just don't trust anyone. So given that, what is it that's underneath here? What is the thing that I've been kind of alluding to, pointing to? It's this. The real key, if you really want to create a high trusting environment, the first thing is there's no such thing as a high trust team, okay? Because that kind of implies that trust is always up here. It's not. Trust will come and go because it's to do with human beings. Actually, distrust isn't the issue. Distrust is actually a lot less dangerous than pretending to trust. Pretending to trust actually is what gets people into trouble. Everyone's worried about, oh, I should trust people and I shouldn't have this. Distrust is fine if you're willing to talk about it. That's the L in the model, BEL. if I'm willing to surface it and be honest about, look, I've got to be honest, in this domain, you've been late 3 times. In this domain of reliability, I've got low levels of trust with you right now. Am I willing to surface that? You see, that is, so acknowledging my distrust is very different than pretending I trust, but not really doing it. So that's another piece. Am I willing to actually do that? But the big piece under here that I've been leading up to is this. If it's inevitable that it will be broken, and it will, then you must develop these muscles. And the muscles that I'm pointing to is the muscle of and this is overlooked by so many people, so many approaches, so many books. It's shocking. You take out your copy of Lencioni tonight, you look in the index, I think forgiveness gets like 1 mention. You want a high trust team, you want a place where trust thrives, you better be good at working with forgiveness. And people have all sorts of stuff about forgiveness because they don't understand what forgiveness is. There's lots of misconceptions about forgiveness. Some people think it means to forget, but it doesn't. Doesn't mean that at all. In fact, the more you try and forget, the harder, the bigger it gets. Some people think it's about condoning it. Okay, what went on in the past is okay. I'm going to pretend it was okay. No, it's not, nothing to do with that. You see, this word forgiveness is huge, and people have so much stuff about it. If I forgive, it means I'm weak. If I forgive, it means I'm letting them off. And it's all made up. Forgiveness, in a nutshell, really comes, I like to talk about it as the ultimate act of responsibility. What that means is you leave the past in the past. You go, okay, that happened. I'm not pretending it didn't happen. It absolutely happened. Maybe it was me, maybe it was you. It happened. We can talk about that. But once we've had that discussion, if I'm going to forgive you, I'm not going to go back to it in future discussions. And this is, for those of you who are married, this is exactly what married couples do all the time. And it's what marketing and sales do. It's what supply chain and distribution do. It's like, okay, I pretend I've forgiven somebody. And then as soon as there's another breakdown, I just go back to the past and say, look, that's the 10th time you've done that. And then I just bring up the past to talk about the present. That means you didn't forgive them. You were hanging on to it. You were just pretending to forgive. So people have so much stuff about being willing to forgive. Now, sometimes people say about apology as well. An apology is absolutely wrapped up in this. But if you think about it, an apology is really a request for you to forgive me. So it's going to come to the same thing. So forgiveness, in terms of what I was alluding to, if you can develop the capacity, or you can develop the team's capacity as a coach, if I can develop their capacity to really get physically, mentally, and emotionally what forgiveness is about, you've got a chance to create a team that can rebound from the inevitable breaks in trust in order to kind of go forward again. But if you're expecting there to be a magical button that gets you to a high trust team all the time, not going to happen. And if you only focus on trust, you're missing everything underneath. Because if I'm unwilling to forgive, or if I'm unwilling to accept someone's apology, i.e. that they're asking me to forgive them, your efforts to really create sustainable growth, trust
Marcus,
are doomed. Okay, so that's what I was going to say. I'll pause there, and you can fire away with any questions and observations.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've never disliked the clock the way I do it today. I think it's been so profound, so enlightening. But it is my duty to inform that there are only 10 minutes left.
That's fine. I'm done. I'm really done.
3 minutes we will require for posting the feedback form, CCU, closing remarks, and from.
I'm good. I'm good.
So, yeah, Anju. So, if you can, please do make use of this time.
Sure. I'll just check how many more questions have come in.
Sandeep, you
Okay,
also
just a
need
minute.
to take a group picture.
While there are no more questions in the chat, but I see a lot of compliments coming in, and I would like to read some of them. They are from from Chitra Ravi saying, "Thank you, Marcus, for such a truly thought-provoking conversation."
Welcome.
Nidhi Agarwal saying, "Forgiving, not forgetting." I'm sure this was in context of some of the sharings that you were talking about, Marcus. Ajay and Kaushik Chatterjee saying, "Understanding the root for forgiveness to give up completely, well, it reveals a profound truth." And loved your articulation, Marcus, for clarity and simplicity is what Pramod says, and supported by many. Alok Sharma, a fantastic session. Ranganath saying, "What an insightful session. It made us think and look inward." And yes, there is.
Anju, in case if there are not questions, can we utilize this time first? Because the compliments will be umpteen. So for taking the pick for our records, because
yes,
it is we've
just
been
one.
looking for this,
Yeah, Sandeep, I
and we
think.
can then continue.
Okay, because I
So,
just came across one
Nandini,
question, so I'll park it. Yeah.
Nandini, if you can please help us by clicking,
Yes.
so everyone may say cheese. Shivani on the screen. Let us know when it is over.
One more time, please.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
Done. Thank you so much.
yeah.
Thank
So,
you, Nandini.
While Anju can continue with the question, Nandini, you can also post the feedback form and the CCU form link,
Yes.
so people can
I'll do
start
that.
filling up. It's important for us to get your feedback so that we can serve you better, and also for the CCU form to be filled with your proper name so that the certificates can be issued. Yeah,
Yes.
Anju, over to you.
Yeah, just give me a minute. I've never seen the chat box pouring so much that I've lost track of which question I was. But
Good.
okay, I'm trying to just hold on to this question.
Anju, this is Valerie. I had a question, if you don't mind, while you're searching the chat box.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, please go ahead. Absolutely. Yes.
Hey, Marcus, Val here. So, Marcus, I just wanted to know, because context is very important, right? Context and culture. And you gave an example of orchid and desert. So that's one part of it. But business is not like orchid and desert, right? While we might say that today the tariffs are impacting, and they are impacting the business, and the results will get impacted, then how do we manage such situations with our clients?
Well, how do you think? I mean,
I
you
don't
can
have the answer, Marcus. I don't have the answer because the fact is that business is getting impacted, and leaders are making their best possible options. They are aware of the culture and context, but there is a macro and economic context which makes things difficult for them.
Okay. So there's no room to answer your question because you've got so many. You see, your context and culture is very clear, which is, Marcus, there are external factors and managers already know about context. They're already doing their best. So if you think about it, you've already, there's no answer to your question. Because your context is very revealing. Based on what you just said, it tells me a lot about your context. You've already decided that certain factors are in play, and that's your desert. So I can give you some orchids, it won't make any difference. This is classic. What you're asking for is you're asking for input here. What I'm offering you is, but take a look at how you're seeing it. Think of everything you just said. If this is recorded, you want to go back to this and you want to notice and just write down what you said to me and look at what that shows you about you, because you're asking for this. Okay, and that And I know I'm being a little tough on you in front of a big group here, and I appreciate, and I am doing that. I'm doing it.
Okay.
But you see, it's great that you spoke up, because I get that it's important for you, but I'm not going to get dragged into teaching and managing. You see, I'm going to say to you, look at the way that you're seeing it, because the way you're seeing it is what's having you do this. You see, this is a classic example of the difference between teaching, managing, coaching versus ontological coaching. So I'm very tempted to jump into the answer. I am, but I'm not going to do it.
No problem. We'll take it offline.
Yeah. Marcus.
I am here with my
Thanks a
question.
lot, Anju. We have only 3 minutes left, and I can't leave my president without the closing remarks, and also felicitating Marcus. Sanjeev Bhatia, if you are there, if I could request you to...
Thank you, Sandeep. Sanjeev here. And
Yeah.
Marcus, I really don't have much words to speak. I could relate every bit of it, every piece of it, every model of it, even the matrix, the trust. Everything's so much relevant, not only as a coach, even in the organization. If anybody is sitting here who's not a coach, but been working in the corporate, take from this session. And that's just fantastic. I wish I could have heard you when I was real in the corporate world and fighting to get all these answers and challenging myself and the team around, including the owners. But yes, I think a lot of takeaways from here. Those who are consultant here, those who are the coaches here, those who have been helping the organization to the real, the real issue. The way you showed the dance between the bottom two, quadrants, where we talked about the, context and the culture and all those things. I think this is much more ignored version. And this is where the issue happens. And that's what you talked about, the team delivery. I think everything's so well connected.
Thank you.
I'm going to, personally, I'm sure many others would like to have the recording, because I need to get ingrained this in my mind. And it becomes very easy then as a coach to really ask the right questions instead of beating around the bush. So Marcus, thank you very much. As an ICW.
Yeah. Nandi, may I please request you to...
Yes, thank you, Sandeep, for bringing Marcus. On behalf of everybody present here, those who are going to see or listen to your video, my heartfelt thanks to you. Once again, thanks, and
it's been a pleasure.
For some time to Mumbai. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Nandini, may I request you to please share the appreciation certificate from ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter on their 10th anniversary and ICW. This
thank you.
Comes to you, and thanks a lot for insightful session. And everyone, in case if we can express our gratitude by one word storm, what is your takeaway from the session? Please post it in the chat box. Spiritual, splendid, inspiring.
Good.
Simple is powerful. Insightful,
simple.
Inspiring and educative, a master class, enriching. So next time we have you, obviously it'll not be for 90 minutes. It'll have to be a workshop. And very, very insightful, I must say. And in case if there are any questions which we get from the audience, we will pass it on to you and we'll be in touch. And
no problem.
We'll look forward to having you in person whenever you are in India and you have time.
You never know. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for inviting me. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.